introductions as we go through the meeting, if that's okay. But a warm welcome to colleagues who are coming to talk about patient stories. So it's a friendly environment. We'll be wanting to find out more, but you're very welcome. So let's start the meeting. Apologies for absence have been received from Chris Chiswell. Have we any others, Company Secretary?
We have. We've got apologies from Amin, Johnny Barney, and from Brown Webster Henders.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? No, thank you. Okay, minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held on the 5th March 2025. Are there any points of accuracy, or can we approve the minutes of the meeting? So are we okay with the minutes? I'm getting lots of nods, thank you. So we'll approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th March 2025. Number 3, action sheet, which again was a follow-up to that meeting. Company Secretary, are there any actions?
Nothing scheduled for this meeting. Everything's going to be updated in July. Thank you, Tony.
Okay, colleagues, okay with that? Let's move on then. Warm welcome. Is it Michaela? Michaela, and your name is
Chelsea.
Chelsea. Nice to meet you, Chelsea. So we're really looking forward to this. It's an important aspect of NHS life. So I'm going to hand over to, I think, Tabitha, just to maybe say a few words, and then we'll start the presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. So I've got Chelsea and Michaela this morning, and they've come to just present a story that highlights the journey of a patient and their family when they agree to donate their organs. And the aim of the story is for us to foster empathy and understanding and the importance of organ donation. And I won't go into the details of the story, and I'll hand over to Michaela. Thank you.
Thank you. So at the moment, there are almost 8,000 people in the UK waiting for a life-saving transplant. And sadly, hundreds of people die each year whilst on the waiting list. Only about 1 in 100 people who die in the UK are able to be donors. And these are typically people who die on intensive care unit or at the emergency department. This just highlights how important it is to promote organ donation and how crucial the role of all staff in these departments is. So we're bringing you today's story to recognize the gift of life the donors give, and also to educate, to promote, to support those who work in these departments and those involved in organ donation. Next slide, please. So the success always lies in teamwork, and there's a close teamwork between our NHS Trust and NHS Blood and Transplant, which is an organisation that employs specialist nurses in organ donation, like Chelsea here. Each trust employs a consultant like myself, who acts as a clinical lead for organ donation. And our role together is, as I said before, to promote, educate, to support, and to provide reports on benchmarking where we stand as a trust within the nation. The process of organ donation, in short, is as follows. Our nurses and medical teams refer patients who are potential organ donors to the organ donation service team in line with the predefined triggers, which are set out by National Institute of Clinical Excellence, as well as the GMC, which stands for the General Medical Council. This node then assesses the potential for possible donation and works alongside the parent team of consultants and nurses to discuss donation with the next of kin and facilitates the donation process, which can take as long as 24, 48 hours, which many people don't know. This process starts with a formal consent and then is completed by active organ retrieval. Next slide, please. So we've already introduced ourselves, so I'll go straight to where we stand as a trust. Every year we have in an average 3 to 6 proceeding organ donors per year, which puts us in a position of a level 3 trust. Of course, this can't be influenced much because patients in intensive care need to be intubated to become organ donors. However, what we can do is improve our referral systems, which we are trying to do at the moment. Organ donation in general, we feel, is very well publicized nationally, but sometimes it's poorly understood. And this is not just from the members of the public, but many times it's also staff who work in NHS who don't fully understand how organ donation works. It is partially probably because it's limited to intensive care units and emergency departments. So today we're bringing the patient story forward to provide a bit of insight in organ donation, to educate, and also mainly just to say that we are actually doing very well at UHMB, and we're doing an incredible work as teams of doctors and nurses, and also everybody else who supports the process. The teams, I feel, are really dedicated, and over the years, we've seen lots of success, lots of successful organ donation stories. We'd like to praise the courage and the bravery of our donor families. And we are bringing you this story next. Next slide, please. Our story is about Joe. Next slide, please. So here you see a few pictures that we'd like to share with families' consent. Joe was born in North Shields in 2002. He was a very happy, very sociable baby, and he shared his life with an older, a younger brother and a younger sister, who all absolutely adored him. Next slide. Unfortunately, Joe had his first seizure at 6 months, and since then his development started to regress significantly. And by the age of 2, he had very frequent seizures and hospital admissions. And at age of 9, he was diagnosed with a condition called Dravet syndrome. This is a rare epilepsy condition, and despite anticonvulsants, he had very frequent seizures, which ranged between 2 to 3 tonic-clonic seizures a week. Every seizure damages your brain. Despite all this, his demeanor never changed. Throughout Joe's life, he was happy, engaging, he was funny, he was seen as very strong and determined. Next slide. We have a little narrative from Joe's family here, and I'll just read it out. As a family, we adored him, adapting work, housing, and social activities to ensure he had the best quality of life possible. Joe loved music, being sung to, although we're all tone deaf, traveling by car, watching trains, buses, emergency vehicles whiz past. He liked to use an iPad to watch TV and videos, and although Joe was non-verbal, all family felt they always knew what he was trying to say. Next slide. It's almost a year ago when, on the 30th of May 2024, Joe was seen to be in an unusual position in bed, which would normally be associated with a seizure. So his family promptly attended to his bedside. He was found to be in a cardiac arrest. His heart had stopped and he stopped breathing as well. So his family started CPR straight away and called an ambulance. After 20 minutes of resuscitation, Joe had something we call return of spontaneous circulation. His heart had restarted, and he was brought into Royal Lancaster Infirmary for post-resuscitation care. This involves admittance to an intensive care unit where we neuroprognosticate, which means we give the patient enough time to assess their neurological function. And we support the patient with ventilation on a ventilator. We monitor their hemodynamics. We manage them fully actively and we control their seizures as well. And this is all to assess whether the recovery is going to be meaningful. Because we felt there's a high likelihood that after some investigations were done, that the recovery probably is unlikely to be meaningful, we've done an early referral to organ donation services. And as I said, despite all the efforts of everyone involved, it was unlikely that Joe will wake up the same way he was before. And we started making plans and to have a discussion with Joe's family to move towards withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. Next slide. On 1st of June, a SNOT attended the hospital and assessed Joey as a potential organ donor. And she worked closely with our team on intensive care to explore the case a bit better. And then together as a team, which is our usual practice, we met with the family and we have explained that Joe is not going to survive his brain injury. Following this, the SNOT raised an opportunity with Joe's family, saying he was in a position to save the lives of many others through organ donation, and explained briefly how the process looks like, how this would take place. I was personally involved in this situation a year ago, and I remember vividly how Joe's family reacted with no hesitation, and they said they've discussed organ donation previously, and they were very convinced that this is what Joe would want. He would want to be an organ donor. So our role at that point was to support the family and Joe through this process, and the family was very well supported through formal consent, which Chelsea will talk about at this point.
So once the family have given us verbal consent, we then support them through the formal consent process, which is quite a lengthy conversation to have with families, a really in-depth discussion. And it's so that we can assess for any risk that could affect the safety of transplantation, and specifically outline exactly which organs and tissues that Joe may be able to donate, and that's for transplantation and/or research in some cases. Due to his age and minimal medical history, he was actually in a position to potentially save the lives of many people, and his family gave full consent for all organs, all tissues, and all research with no restrictions. Next slide, please. Following formal consent, there's a number of investigations that need to take place to allow us to continue the process and have all the information available. So this includes numerous blood tests for tissue typing, virology screening, blood group testing, and also to assess trends in organ function. The radiology team attended the intensive care unit to perform an urgent chest X-ray for us. This is standard for all potential organ donors. The physiotherapy team attended to also perform chest physio to help us to optimise Joe's lungs. Not just for potential lung donation, but also this has an impact on all the other organs that can potentially be donated. And the nursing team performed an ECG for us as well. Joe was a potential heart donor, and in these instances, an echocardiogram is needed so heart centres can assess whether this is a transplantable heart. It was highlighted that Morecambe Bay doesn't actually have a cardiology service out of hours, and that's not uncommon in smaller hospitals, but this can be a source of significant delay, as usually without one, cardiac centre will accept provisionally, but only formally accept once we have been able to get an echo, which may only be the next day. However, in this instance, Consultant Michaela is actually accredited to perform what's called a focused echo or a FICE, and this would give us the information that we needed. So thankfully having Michaela on site allowed us to continue. Next slide, please. So the following day, and it will take a long time for us to set up all these investigations and get all that information. Potential recipients had now been identified for kidney and pancreas transplants. So in collaboration with the theatre team at Royal Lancaster, they allocated us an available theatre and also some staff to support us where needed. A team of specialist surgeons from the National Organ Retrieval Service, or NORS teams, they were mobilised to attend the hospital. So we're not transplanted. We have specialist surgeons who attend to perform the surgery. We do a comprehensive team brief between us as the organ donation nurses, ICU teams who may be involved, theatre teams and the NORS surgeons to ensure that everyone understands what's about to happen, what everyone's roles are. And then we was ready to proceed. So the next step then was for extubation, so taking Joe off the ventilator and allowing him to die naturally. So with his family by his side, Joe was extubated and he died very peacefully and very quickly. His family were able to say the goodbyes, and very shortly after, Joe was taken into the operating theatre for the retrieval operation. Following a respectful and dignified surgery, Joe went on to donate his liver and both of his kidneys. Next slide, please. Joe's parents couldn't be here today because they are still struggling with grief and felt it was too difficult, but they kindly sent over their thoughts about donation. So when organ donation was mentioned, whilst Joe was in the intensive care unit at Lancaster Hospital, we didn't hesitate as we firmly believed it was what Joe would have wanted. And as a family, we all agreed that if any of us were in a similar situation, we would all do the same. The process itself was extremely professional, steps involved clearly communicated to us, and Joe was treated with the utmost dignity and respect. A&E and intensive care staff have been exceptional, and the donor team equally so. It is comforting to think that Joe's tragic passing had enabled others to extend their lives and that somewhere his wonderful spirit lives on. Communication with the donor team continued after Joe's passing, and we received 5 golden hearts via post, which we all wore with pride at his funeral. Family and friends asked about the hearts, and if our conversations prompted just one person to think about organ donation, it will be further proof that Joe's legacy lives on. The following Joe's surgery, a gentleman in his early 60s received a kidney transplant after waiting for several weeks. A lady in her early 30s received a kidney transplant after waiting for over 2 years. A gentleman in his late 40s received a liver transplant after waiting for several months. Joe saved 3 lives that day, but he went on to improve the lives of many others through tissue donation. He donated his corneas to restore sight, as well as the sclera, the white part of the eye, heart valves, both arteries and skin to aid in a number of different surgeries. 2 people have received a corneal transplant thanks to Joe and his family, and 4 people, including a 2-year-old girl, benefited from his sclera being used in ophthalmic surgeries. Next slide, please. And I'll hand back over to Paul for closing remarks.
Thank you, Chelsea. I've got the privilege of chairing our organ donation committee, and I've had the opportunity to meet with the relatives and loved ones, deceased organ donors and recipients. Whilst organ donation doesn't necessarily ease the pain points, many families do find comfort and a sense of purpose in knowing their loved ones' organs saved lives, offering a positive outcome from a tragic event. You'll see within your packs that you've actually got some data. We do monitor the data, so we do track this through the committee. And as Kayla said in her opening remarks, we're a tier 3 organisation. We've had 4 donations this year, the same as last year, so we're being consistent in our approach. The achievements that we achieve are because we have a really strong organ donation pathway. And what I will simply do today is, as the chair of the committee, just ask you to recognise the acts of organ donors' families. Thank Michaela and Chelsea and the rest of the team, and just help raise awareness about the success of our organ donation programme and encourage people to confirm their decision to consent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Tony Oakman, I'm the interim chair, and I'll leave my remarks here, but I just want to say, Michaela, Chelsea, thank you. Really moving, powerful account of the important work you do. Thank you, Paul, for chairing the committee. I'm going to ask the chief exec to open up any comments, and we'll go from there.
Michaela, Chelsea, thank you for bringing that story to the board. I could hear particularly, Michaela, it's a difficult one to tell, having been close to the family and Joe. So from my perspective, this tier 3 organisation and 4 to 6 donations per year. I know it's a really difficult conversation. I've been there as a family member, having lost someone and had that discussion. Is there anything more we could be doing as an organisation to promote, encourage, or make it easier for families to have that kind of conversation when it's needed? Because I'm not sure whether that 4 to 6 per year is what we should be achieving, or given the numbers of patients that might die in those circumstances, it might be able to provide organ donation. Is there more to do for us, do you think? Or what would you look to do in terms of any support for that?
So the levelling is kind of done in a reverse way. So looking at our past figures, we're then awarded that level 3 of this is what you do on average. So this is now your kind of level benchmark. So we've consistently been between 3 and 6 donors per year. So that's why we've been at level 3. It's not that we're underperforming in terms of those numbers. As Paul said, we do monitor all organ donation activity. So part of my role is to audit every death in critical care and the emergency department to ensure that we're not missing any potential donors. And we've not had any missed referrals, at least for the last year. We work really closely with the intensive care teams and the nurses and provide a lot of teaching about when to refer. And I do think that referrals have just improved quite well over the last sort of 2 years. It's sometimes you're in a situation where you get quite a late referral, and these conversations have been had with family and were brought in at the last minute. And it's quite difficult once the family is accepted, their treatment's going to be withdrawn and they're expecting the loved ones to die, for us then to ask for more time. But Michaela's been working really hard with the ICU team to notify us as early as possible, especially due to the traffic. Lancaster is one of our most northern hospitals in our region. So we are performing really well with no referrals.
I'd just like to add that across the Northwest, we do work together with other trusts. We have regional organ donation meetings where we share information, knowledge, we exchange information, and we have implemented a few strategies from bigger trusts that have, let's say, 20, 30 donations a year. And these bigger trusts usually, I must say, appreciate how hard it must be for a smaller trust like us to do organ donation well, because you only have 4 chances a year to do it well. Whereas the data for 20, 30 donations a year might be very easy to interpret in a different way, Also, I think Paul is working with chairs across the Northwest as well. He goes to meetings, and we have a national organization that basically leads on strategies. We have a 2030 strategy where we are trying to minimize missed potential, basically, and that's what we're focused on at the moment. In terms of family support, we as doctors, as consultants in intensive care, after breaking the bad news, have to take a step back, because supporting the family needs a professional like Chelsea, specialist nurse in organ donation, because this is about bereavement support. And we have been working closely with our bereavement department as well. We have a chaplain that's on our on our organ donation committee meetings, and we have members of bereavement team there as well. So we have a good variety of members on our organ donation committee to basically ensure that we approach the topic from multiple angles. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got another question from a colleague, Sarah.
Hi there, I'm Sarah Rees. I chair the Quality Assurance Committee in the Trust, and actually I've got a personal interest. My father had kidney failure and he had a kidney transplant, actually, albeit it wasn't successful. So I think just in terms of acknowledging the difference it makes to people's lives, you know, work you do is really important, and thank you for that. My question is almost more for colleagues around our governance. I think that we should be receiving a report on our activities around organ donation, and I think some of the responses you provided to Aaron's question have been really helpful to explain how we work, how that sits nationally, how regionally. And it was really to ask if perhaps we can reinstate the report, which I think is in our terms of work schedule for the committee, quality committee, to receive maybe an annual report from the organ donation committee.
You do that. I've just completed the annual report. It's actually on the patient safety group meeting today, but it's an issue that gets escalated.
Thank you, Sarah. We could spend a lot of time having conversations, but ultimately they're really for the agenda. But I just want to put on record, first of all, can you make sure the family are thanked for sharing their story? Because it's a really painful story, but they've shared it because it's also a very positive story. I'm always amazed by these because these are light and dark moments, the dark moments in terms of saying goodbye to a loved one and all the challenges and the upset that brings. But then now to this of the possibilities of new life and new beginnings for people and a range of people as you've demonstrated. And I think what I would want to put on record is on behalf of the Trust Board to thank you for your compassion and the way you are professional about the role and the complexity of it and how you tackle with the individuals, how you deal with that in a sensitive and caring way. And that just means everything to everyone involved in this process. So big thank you on behalf of us all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Wasn't that bad, was it?
Thank you for having us.
No, well, it's been our pleasure, privilege. Thank you. So you're welcome to leave or you can stay, whatever you would like to do.
I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of
No,
the
you stay, I'll.
No, you'll be a first. Thank you, folks.
day.
That's superb. Really, really informative. Thank you, Tabitha. Oh, appreciate that. So we move on to the next item. Agenda 5 is the chair's report. As this will be my final board meeting as interim chair, I'm going to just take a few moments more, but not many, just to say a few things. Going through the report at 4, I just want to put on record my thanks. The ambition we had at the outset in the footsteps of Professor Thomas was just to build on his legacy and just try and keep this a smooth transition as possible between now and the new chair starting. I want to first of all thank the NEDS colleagues for their support, Wise Council, and putting up with my occasional difference of opinion on things or whatever, because you've been brilliant as a set of colleagues and have been really collegiate in your approach. So big thanks to the NEDS. Secondly, I want to thank personally Aaron and the executives. It's amazing when you get close to things, you realise how hard working and what a great executive team we've got, as well as NEDS, and it makes a huge difference. I was advised this would be a relatively quiet period. There'd be not much going on. I'm only 35, look how I've aged. But having said that, it's been brilliant to work with a great team. And last but not least, the late governor and the governing members have been stellar throughout. Because again, as we'll get onto the report in a second, they've helped us navigate one or two issues throughout the period. So a big thank you. Moving into the report, the only thing I want to highlight under chair's activities that myself and Aaron recently met. So objectives for Aaron have been agreed for 25-26. No surprises, they're aligned with the 25-26 plan and the regional and national policy agendas, and these have been signed off. I also attended a leadership session with the NHS England where Dr. Penny Dash, the new chair of NHS England, joined us to share our views on the continued pressures following a year end and the need for strong leadership and support for 25-26. And I'm pleased to say that I think we're in a good place on that particular matter. In terms of, again, this is in Aaron's report, but I'm going to say it. We've been having ongoing conversations with System and with PwC regarding the financial sustainability of the trust and the wider quality issues. These meetings, I have to say, generate huge amounts of activity and often quite unplanned activity. It's not all regimented and organised in advance. And throughout the Chris, Helen, and the wider executive team have demonstrated and have stood up to the requirements and pressures. And as you'll see in the chief exec's report, there's some really good outcomes coming down the track. My final comments are in terms of non-exec updates, two other updates. One is about Amin, who's our NED, Chair of Finance. Spoke to Amin on the phone yesterday. He's in good fettle. He's still recovering. He might want to start thinking about sitting on Teams for 1 or 2 meetings, but he's on a period of plan B at the minute, but he's in good perspectives and will be sending an email or contacting you individually. And last but not least, I'm pleased to confirm that Andrew Stevenson CB has been appointed to new chair of the trust following a rigorous inclusive group process. I just want to put on record my thanks to the lead governor, the company secretary and the officers involved with supporting the senior independent director to enable us to achieve such a wonderful appointment. I know we'll give him a warm welcome when he starts, and the technical start date is the 27th of May. So I'm looking forward to working with Andrew in his new role. And I'm going to leave the farewell to Chris and Jane because that will be in our update. So that's it, folks. Are there any specific questions or points of clarification with regards to the report? Scott?
No.
No, you did. So I think you were saying so that never get vote. No. Okay, should we move on to the chief exec's update?
Perfect, thank you, Chair. So an unusual introduction to my report, given the leadership changes that have been happening in the organisation over the last 2 or 3 months. So I will reciprocate, put on record my thanks to Tony as stepping into the interim chair's role, done with real gravitas and professionalism, Chair, if you don't mind me saying, and helping us steer through kind of the 25-26 annual plan and some of the scrutiny we've had in the system recently. So really grateful for your personal professional support over this period. I would join the board in welcoming Andrew Stevenson in the role of chair to join us in May. Looking forward to working with Andrew in the future. From an executive team perspective, Jamie Nicholas left us now to start her role as the Chief Medical Officer in Sheffield. I'm very grateful to Caroline Brock, who's acting up into the role for a period. So welcome Caroline today to the board. We have appointed a permanent CMO in Helen Skinner, who will join us on the 1st of August. Helen will be periodically joining us over the next few months, just as part of that engagement activity early. So we'll get the opportunity to meet with members. Chris Adcock left us as the Chief Financial Officer last week to join Region, so a promotion, and congratulations to Chris. Grateful to Helen Cobb, who's going to be acting up in the role of Chief Financial Officer whilst we go out to recruit for a permanent position. So Helen, welcome you to the board today. And also congratulations to Scott, who has now taken on the role as Deputy Chief Executive effective from the 1st of April. So I'm looking forward to working with Scott in that role. So it feels a little bit like a housekeeping update, but that's where we are with leadership change. And actually, what I'm really pleased with is we're in that natural cycle of improvement, that 3 to 5 year sweet spot where people who've done really good work look to further their careers, take advantage of the opportunities and the experience that they've had here and gain promotions and extensions of their own experience. It's really kind of exciting to see people do that. But I'm delighted with the strength and depth we've got in the deputies, in colleagues, in our leadership teams able to step up and maintain that kind of delivery and improvement trajectory that we're on. So a good, for me, test of our kind of succession planning, talent management and ability to operate stably over that period. Just normal updates for me around that national kind of regional local position, which I'll just spend a few minutes on. The national picture at the moment is quite challenging, actually. So we are in the midst of finalising 25-26 plans. Still lots of pressure in the system on satisfying all of the requirements of the annual plan objectives that were set by kind of the department and NHS England for, you know, financial improvement. We've taken big inroads, haven't we, on setting our plans for this year to try and get to break even at year end. Around performance for UEC, cancer diagnostics and elective recovery. I know Scott will say a bit under the IPR around elective performance, but we're under pressure now to go even further on some of our elective recovery in particular, which we're talking to the system about. And we're also now having to think about the work we're doing around transformational change and improvement that the national team and the regional team are looking to support through things like commissioning intentions and clinical strategies. So there's a lot still nationally being pushed on 25-26, even though we're a month into the year. The rest of the national conversation is about change. So I talked at the last board around the intended removal of NHS England as an entity and the Department of Health taking over kind of the overall running of health and care services, which was also signalled as some organisational change required at things like the NHSE regional teams and integrated care boards. That will mean significant reductions in management costs and infrastructure in both of those structures, and also some changes in roles and responsibilities. And we don't yet know what that looks like. There's the language of blueprint of operating models, and we're expecting to see some outcomes of that over the coming weeks, including over that similar period, some early feedback from the 10-year plan, which we're expecting at the end of May, June. So I think, Chair, there's going to be an opportunity for board, probably in its June, July cycle, to really sit back and consider what those changes mean practically and what it might mean for us and how we engage them with partners and stakeholders in the future. But I don't have any further updates on that national picture up to this point. From a system perspective, Integrated Care Board, there's a natural dovetailing then of responding to the 25-26 plan asks. And I just need to recognise two things. There's been an announcement, obviously, last week with Kevin Lavery leaving the system as the Chief Executive of the ICB. He'll leave with our best wishes. And I'd like to put on record my thanks personally for the work that I've done with Kevin in the role of collaborative lead CEO. So Kevin's done a lot of work in the system over his tenure as the Chief Executive of the ICB. Sam Profit, who's the Chief Financial Officer, will act up into the role over a period until there's a recruitment for a permanent ICB Chief Executive. I suspect that's going to be a little while because of the blueprint and the operating model changes before they go out. We're also working closely with our ICB colleagues around reflections of this planning process and their commissioning intentions for future configuration of acute community services. You'll see some of those featuring in our own plan. I think there's some work to do over the summer about giving ourselves an earlier insight into next year and the year after around those key changes. And again, we'll update the board in the autumn, Chair, as we progress that. More locally, I'll put on record again my thanks for team's efforts through 24-25. We delivered in the main all of the objectives we set ourselves, in particular the continuous improvement trajectories. And we've managed to deliver a lot of change this year. So whether it's in governance, quality teams, whether it's the divisional restructure, some of the work we did around our sites, reconfiguration, wall closures, etc. So for our teams to have managed through that change and delivered, I think it's testament to the leadership capability we have in our organisation. Should give us good confidence of the future and what we're doing to continue that journey. We've got a couple of items on the agenda which I won't talk to, but they're reflected in my report, particularly around the staff survey and next steps around kind of leadership and divisional improvement. Two last points I will make, Chair. One is some very good news. We'd spent a lot of time this year going through an accreditation and application process with the North West Observatory and the anti-racism agenda to achieve bronze accreditation of the work we're doing around anti-racism and equality and diversity. And I'm pleased to announce that after a first application, we've been awarded bronze status. That's not usual. It's quite a in-depth and challenging process to go through. I'm not sure there are many organisations, I'll leave it up to that go through that first and get that first accreditation. We won't rest on our laurels. We'll be looking at silver and gold as we progress our own agendas in this area, but it's right to thank both the network, the leadership teams and others on the work that's gone into that. So my last reflection, Chair, is to recognise again in public the outcomes of the coroner's inquest and the Prevention of Future Deaths report. We did issue a statement at the time, which I will repeat here, which is an unequivocal apology to parents for the care that we provided to Ida at the time that led to Ida's death, and the way which our teams and our organisation responded afterwards in supporting that family, dealing with that process, the complaint and the improvement that was needed at the time. We have fully agreed with all of the coroner's recommendations and reflections from the Prevention of Future Deaths report. And I know as a board, we've had a number of conversations about some key objectives for us. First and foremost, for Ida's parents and family to get the answers that they needed. For our teams to feel supported and able to be open, honest and transparent during the inquest to give those reflections. And for us as a board to receive the coroner's report and recommendations, not in the context of something that happened in 2019 to 2021, but to reflect on where we are today and make sure that we could be assured that that experience, those circumstances would not be the same today. And I know we'll talk later as a board on our response to that, which is due on the 16th of May. Obviously, when our response goes in, we will make that public and make sure that we follow through on any additional improvements that we support. I think it's also important to note that we've written personally to Ida's parents to close the complaint that was raised at the time and to offer to meet and discuss some of the improvement work that we're taking forward and to make sure that they get all that they need over this next period. So I won't say any more than that, Chair, but only just to reiterate the statement we did make at the time and to confirm our next steps in terms of response to the coroner's PFD.
Thank you for that really comprehensive and thorough report. It reflects the breadth of activity currently being undertaken. Are there any specific comments, remembering that a number of reports on the board later on are going to go into some of the details referenced within Aaron's report? Are there any specific questions or issues that people want to? Okay, thank you, Aaron. Should we move on to the lead governance report? Susie.
Right, just to say, just as you said, we thought we'd have a nice quiet winter and spring, and it didn't happen. One of the big things, obviously, we were dealing with as Board of Governors was the search for a new chair. And I have to say, I'm very relieved that we used alumni, and Frank McKenna particularly, fielded something like 480 candidates at first, which we then had to winnow down. And we ended up with 5 and then 4 of all extraordinary caliber. I mean, it really was a very hard choice to make because all of them were really so very, very good. And we have, as you see, appointed Andrew Stevenson. I would hope that the rest of them I've taken as read, but any questions anybody has, I will happily.
Thank you, Susie. Are there any specific questions or comments? No. Again, Susie, thank you for your leadership in that appointment process. And again, thank you for Nicola for and Paul for the team for supporting through that process. So thank you. Well done.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, folks, we're going to move on to agenda items 8, which are maternity case. It's a serious report here. I'm always pleased to see Susan. I'm always pleased to see Tabitha. So I'm going to hand over to Tabitha first, and then it's over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Chair. Without further ado, I'll refer to Susan to take us through our maternity update for Board Assurance.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here too. I'll take the report as read and I'll just go over some key highlights for you. First of all, the Maternity Safety and Support Programme. It was written in the report that we had our rapid quality review yesterday, at which our achievements and progress were well acknowledged by the MSSP team, and will now move to a full assurance visit in the near future. The date is to be agreed yet, with a view to exiting the programme finally. In terms of mandatory education, I bring this up because it was something that was identified at inquests and is included in the PFD. I just wanted to give an assurance that we are on track to be 98 and 100% compliant by the end of May for medical colleagues and midwifery colleagues respectively. And we have also now introduced a monthly monitoring and tracking process. Myself and the obstetric leads get a report every month, and individuals that are not compliant or about to run out of compliance are chased up and booked onto the relevant programme that they need to do. And that has now been integrated into a new performance meeting that we'll be having every month with our senior midwifery colleagues. In terms of the maternity and neonatal improvement plan, we've now completed 73 out of the 99 actions are all completed and verified. There are 4 delays. not 5, as is on your report. So that has changed. The delays are around signage, the neonatal bassinet, the bereavement suite, and the early warning tools. Most of which have been a little bit out of our control, but we have plans around all of those. The maternity dashboard, I'll not go over all of it, but you'll see that I've started to provide just a highlight of where we need to be more vigilant with and have plans around. There are 3 areas where we need to be vigilant about, not concerning, but I just want to keep an eye on that, and that's preterm births. There seems to be a bit of a spike in that. Term admissions to the nursery has actually moved from red to yellow. So the 5 work streams that we've been implementing have proven to be quite successful, and we've seen that start to return to mostly into common cause variation. There's just one particular area that remains in special cause, so I've moved that to an amber rather than a red area. And then the 3rd area is the delays in induction. That's part of a much bigger piece of work that we're doing at the moment, and I'll report to QAC in September. It needs triangulating with maternal conceptions, with obstetric practice, and with the delays as well. So that report will go to QAC in September. And then there's one area requiring intervention, and that's 3rd and 4th degree tears, not overall, just in one particular area, but I just want to keep an eye on that. And there's some conversations being had around how we managed instrumental births, i.e. Doing episiotomies proactively rather than just pulling the baby out without a cut, essentially. So that conversation is happening now. And then there's just one ongoing area of concern, and that's the internal deflections. Now, we have seen some improvements on this since we reopened Helm Chase. But just to tackle this more proactively, we're having daily cross-trust huddles between maternity unit managers. We're intervening for problem solving, especially with regard to patient flow. In maternity, getting timely paediatric reviews so babies can be discharged sooner, doing timely discharges of women and their babies, and proactive planning around inductions of labour. That's it from me.
Thank you, Susan, for that very precise review, really helpful, and the detailed papers. I know this has been to the Quality Committee for assurances as well, so I'm going to invite the chair of the Quality Committee just to give her perspectives in terms of the bundle, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Susan. We had a good discussion at Quality Assurance Committee last week on all of the points actually that Susan's highlighted here. I think the first thing I do want to say as chair of Quality Assurance Committee, non-executive director, was to sort of reinforce the comments the Chief Executive's made in terms of our apologies to the families and ways in which we'll be looking for assurance in seeing where we've got to now and then the improvements we still need to make. And we discussed that, and some of the things that we will be looking at are the internal audits that are taking place over the next year. So review of the Kirkhope recommendations and their embeddedness and the impact of those. And also there's an internal audit later in the year in terms of how we respond to the findings of the IDLOC inquest. And I think recognising that actually some of the coroner's findings will be following process, but actually we focused on a process and not the outcomes and impact of that process. And so that's one of the things that that review will look at. And for me, it's also important that our PSERF work, so our personal safety investigations, and making sure we've had the learning from those also feels like a really important point related to this as well. We have the ICB who attend the Quality Assurance Committee, so in terms of some external scrutiny of discussions, that's already there. And we did see a line of questioning actually in the committee, which reflected that sense of, okay, are we really going into the impacts and the learnings from these things that actually related to our complaints report. And the CQC has also requested to attend Quality Assurance Committee, and of course we've supported that request. We haven't got a date for that yet, but we're happy to, of course, support that. It's really important that we're open to that. The final bit I wanted to add as an additional piece of assurance that we received at Quality Assurance Committee, and it's in the papers as well, is where anyone's lapsed in their training related to fetal monitoring, their practice is going to be restricted, and so they will only be in an intrapartum area under supervision from they. So we've got further assurance around safety for mothers and babies in that scenario as well. So I just wanted to add those additional points really to what Susan talked about from the insurance perspective.
Okay, so I'm really glad you picked up the issue about training because it's referenced in the not in the covering paper, but at paragraph 10 about standards not being met in last year's assessment. So that focus will obviously come by whack in terms of insurances, in terms of what's going on. I'm going to bring Alison in and then maybe bring Alison, the other Alison, in as a maternity champion. Alison.
Yeah, so we picked up at People Committee, the training reporting that you see in the IPR is for the core skills. So they are the nationally mandated requirements for everybody in our organisation. What we've picked up through People Committee is a commitment through the programme board that we'll look to enhance that reporting and add something into the IPR. It will take several months for us to be able to do this, but to categorise the training that would be a job specific essential requirement. So not the core skills, but the job specific essentials that will be able to then feed into the IPRs for both divisional performance reviews and also for People Committee and the board.
Great, okay, that's even more reassurance. Sorry, Alison, I'm going to bring Karen in because I suspect it's on the back of this. Karen Deany.
Oh, thank you, Chair. No, absolutely. My point was exactly the one that Ali has just made. So, but I did have a question. So should I introduce that and I will come back to it? Okay, thank you. It was a question for Susan. Thank you, Susan. Absolutely excellent report. I just particularly was interested in table 1 and I can see the predicted compliance by the end of May 2025. I just wondered if there is a target date for all of that compliance to hit 100% and when that might be.
Thank you, Karen. We're hoping that by the end of June, so the prompt days are run once a month. So if you miss 1 month, you go over to the next month. And obviously it goes up and down because people don't become not compliant all at the same time. So it's staggered throughout the year. So I'm hoping that by the end of June, we'll have 100% compliance, but I'm monitoring it every month. And I'm working with one of our obstetric leads as he's keen for our obstetricians to be equally as compliant.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Alison, as our maternity champion, any comments specifically you want to make?
I think after speaking with the maternity and neonatal voices partnership support that we have in the organisation, the fact that we have reflected and this mandatory training is being taken seriously, but it would also demonstrate that we're taking it seriously, that there's an onus on restricting practice if people are non-compliant. I think with sickness and with maternity leave, sometimes you're never going to hit 100% because those staff are physically in the trust working at that time. But I think there needs to be a recognition that when they come back in, mandatory training has to be picked up straight away. Yeah, I know you're on that, Susan, so thank you.
It might just be worth saying that the CNST standard is 90%, and we've reached that over the last few years. However, it's all very well until it's not very well. And not being compliant doesn't necessarily make you an unsafe practitioner. But if you run into an issue and there's a clinical incident, of course, it's one of the first things that we look at.
Okay. Tabitha, apologies.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to give board assurance to sort of say some of the learning from maternity and the requirements around clinical governance, mandatory training. The learning is being spread across the organisation to make sure that we don't just focus on one clinical area, but actually spread what's come out of maternity into other clinical areas. Just wanted to make it clear.
Yeah, a really important point. Okay, I think we're asked to the board of directors is asked to receive and approve the report of assurance, which I think we've had. Still more work to be done, particularly around mandatory training, we've said, and also to know that any exceptions or escalations will be reported to the board of directors by the chair of the quality committee. So obviously the Chair Quality Committee has got a key role in helping ensure that we're over this as we are and we should be. It's a really important issue. So thank you, Susan. Thank you, Tabitha. Appreciate it. Right, we are now moving on to agenda 9, the Integrated Performance Dashboard and Report Month 11, incorporate matters raised by the Executive Team and through the Insurance Committees. Deputy Chief Executive, Scott.
So we'll do the usual time-honoured fashion of safety and quality, people, finance, and then access. Just one point to make first is we had the first cycle last week of the performance reviews under the new performance and accountability framework, and I think certainly the early exec views on that is that really good. So to be the first one since the transition to divisions, there's obviously an important kind of safety check for us on those performance reviews. Using the new segmentation in the accountability framework was really worthwhile and positive. The letters arising from those 3 performance reviews obviously have gone out to the divisions most importantly, and I've been a running audit trail of the against the performance and accountability framework, but they've also come to the 3 committee chairs for QAC, people and F&P yesterday afternoon. So you should expect to see them, and they'll be in the packs for the next committees. So it's an important point under the, I guess, the performance in the broadest sense section of the agenda. But without further ado, both safety and quality first by Tabitha and Caroline as CNO and CNO.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Chair. One thing I just wanted to highlight is that before I go into the whole executive summary in terms of the patient safety data, please note that our scorecard is inclusive of the ED and fracture clinic data in around falls and pressure ulcers, but it's actually not pulling into the SPC charts. And this is because we are in the transition of the new divisions and everything, and that's being currently rectified. So when you look in your packs, you probably see the data on the, on the scorecard. But when you then go into the SPC charts, it's kind of saying no data for pressure ulcers and no data for falls. I just wanted to clarify that before we go into the question. So when we look at our patient safety incidents, we are in common cause variation, and incidents causing moderate or above remain below the median. We have felt and have seen a sort of low number of reports in incidents, and we have an action, and one of our team talks will be around the raising awareness for people to report incidents, no matter how low they are. They can be sort of dealt with within the divisional governance. If they need to be then escalated through our governance structures. We also have a never event that's been reported in this, but it was already escalated to both board and QAC in the last. So it just shows, because this is February data, we are kind of talking to. In terms of our PSF, we have not instigated any PSIIs, which is patient safety investigations, during the February month, simply because none met our local or national requirements for PSF. However, saying that, we do have outstanding PSIIs. We've got 23 at the moment. The good news is now we've appointed about 3 new PSII leads, and Sarah is there, can correct me. And we've changed our model also to use our 3 business partnership governance to sort of make sure that we are not behind with any, because that's where our learning comes from those investigations. In terms of our complaints, there are no complaints that are exceeding 5 months, which was our trajectory that we keep reducing from 6 months to 5 months to 4 months. And we remain in common cause variation, and we've got no revisits in complaints. And the complaints response is really improved to 3 days complaints response, which is really good. Duty of candor, we are at 89.5%. Some of this is because of our Ulysses and how it picks duty of candor. To sort of like submitted within 10 days. Sometimes it doesn't pull it timely, but we are working to make sure that we are completing within those 10 working days. And where we have issues, we are sort of talking to divisional through our ERG. So when we come to falls, that's where I was saying on the scorecard is showing 106 total inpatient falls. But this number includes ED and fracture clinic, which shouldn't be included. Because when we monitor falls in our metrics, usually it's about our inpatient areas. So 3 falls that resulted in moderate harm and no lapses in care identified in 2 out of the 3 cases. Lessons learned around application of enhanced care continues. And we had our fundamentals of care quarterly report come to PAC, which is actually quite reassuring because on the fundamentals of care, there's more than falls and pressure ulcers. There's all the fundamentals of care, holistic to patient care. So pressure ulcers, we have got a few category 2, which are standing at 41 in total, with the majority having no lapses in care. And this again includes ED data. Category 3, we have 4 in total. 1 has since been downgraded after validation. So there's only 3 hospital reported, no lapses in care. We remain 0 at category 4, which is good because this then instigates like safeguarding issues. So we're doing a deep dive into recent spike in category 2 pressure ulcers, so that we can either look at support for staff or equipment. Scott mentioned performance, and it was highlighted that we need some pumps for some of our beds for pressure ulcers, and that has been approved for the pumps to be supplied so our patients are kept safe. Family and friends test. The overall satisfaction is at 94%, which is really good. Response rate of 17.8% against the 13% that's expected nationally. This excludes ED data, which is at 85.8 against target. I have to highlight to board that we are moving away from the current friends and family test to in-house. So we may see a dip in the response figures, but my teams, the patient experience teams are working really, really hard, actually going into clinical areas and talking to patients. They're finding it quite useful because then it's actually helping with some pulse complaints because they're hearing and seeing. But just to inform board that we've moved into an in-house system. So bear with us whilst we embed it. Mixed sex accommodation, this one will remain for a while, but it's a requirement for national guidance that we talk about mixed sex accommodation breaches. So we had 24 breaches in February due to the delays in transfers. Moving on swiftly, IPC, we had 7 cases of CDI, 12 cases of GNBSI, 1 case of NMSS, and 1 case of MRSA. All were healthcare associated, and thematic reviews are happening, training is happening, and we are changing our education to try and help staff improve. And I will hand over to Caroline for VTE and mortality.
So I'll start with mortality. Our healthcare evaluation data remains green benchmark to the rest of the country at 94.56. That's really positive. Our HSMR data is 94.6. We have no alerts in the system for that, so that's also really positive. VTE, obviously we're still benchmarking around 67.8% and have done for the last few months. The last submission to NHS England for March has dipped to 61%. Now we now know as of the last 2 days why that's the case. It's partly to do with the dashboards we've got within the divisions have merged, and then we're not picking up the data that we should be picking up. So that's partly the problem. The other problem that we've just picked up is that after the Lorenzo software update that we had in March, we're having issues with it in that it's deleting some data and losing some data. So we are in the process and should have that next week back on the system. So we'll probably be able to amend that submission. So we expect, or we will validate it by the end of next week, that actually we're staying at about the same level. So that it isn't actually correct. That is a data issue rather than a issue. Now, I take a deep breath. UHMBT BT Improvement Breakthrough Collaborative Series, which is the I didn't name it. The next 12 months worth of how we're going to improve that data to the national standard. 95% has started this month and it is on track. So we are pulling together a team of clinical and audit leads who are going to be working towards delivering this to get us up to the national standard, which should be at 95%, we think, by March next year, with a continuous improvement over that period. And that's going to include lots of different actions. So we've got a 3 one-day learning programme planned over the next year, which will include all clinicians across the trust. Also some virtual learning events on Teams and updated e-learning packages on the TMS. We've got some Foundation Year 1 champions who are going to start leading for that, and the teams are going to start with basically the worst performing specialties, so we get the highest hit the quickest in terms of seeing those figures rising. So there's a lot of work going on there. The BTE, so we've got Kathy Hay on about DMDs who's leading currently on the BTE programme, but the BPE clinical lead has gone out and should be appointed next week, so we will have somebody who is actually looking at that every week, but we are looking at the things weekly and we'll continue to do so. And then obviously every month we'll continue to review the figures and make sure that we are continuing to improve as expected. So there is a lot of work going into that. So I expect to see that should improve over the next few months. Obviously, we're just starting on that process.
Okay. Scott? Ali?
So from the people side of things, you'll notice again that this is March data, so I'll remind everybody that this is skewed because of the impact of one LSC transfer, and we are making manual adjustments to that where possible in the reporting. You can see from a recruitment perspective, the vacancy rate is rising, but it's not statistically significantly rising when you take out one LSC from that mix, and that's helpful because you can triangulate that with the stability of the turnover levels. So there's no real spike in turnover happening there. And we've referred previously to the impact of the fire break and those holding vacancies for recruitment as we go through organisational change processes as well. What we will see as well from April is, because of the budget setting principles that we agreed and the removal of the long-standing vacancies, we will see a shift in the reporting from a vacancy position for the April positioning as well. So just to have that in mind as we work forward into April's report. And time to hire is in special cause variation for cause for concern, and this is a concern for us. Not only does this is this impacted by our activities around the fire break delays, but most notably now the recruitment team and the non-medical recruitment side is actually working at around 10% of their establishment, having had many of the staff now having left post the transfer to one LSC. We haven't recruited actively and deliberately to those vacancies because of the impending transformation work and the pooling of the teams within one LSC. So we haven't recruited to those deliberately, but it is having an impact on the time to hire. We have mitigated this as well as we possibly can through the use of some bank resources within the recruitment team, but this will be reliant on that transformation in one LSC to address the issue sustainably. Absence is in common cause variation. You'll see there that we are very close to our target of 5%, and we are by far the lowest sickness absence across our system. In terms of agency, the link to some of the really positive work that's happened and has continued to happen throughout the course of the year on medical recruitment in particular, we can see here that we came in at the end of the year at a 2.41% agency expenditure, which is well below the national ceiling that's set for us. And then just finally on appraisal and core skills, I've already highlighted around the improvements to the training reporting that we're going to be putting into place. But you'll recall that we did pause some training and appraisal processes during Q4 as part of the financial sustainability response. They have now restarted from April, so we will see those improving now in the future report. And we have taken a report through People Committee, which I'm sure Karen will highlight in the AAA, around a very different approach to appraisals that we're going to be piloting from Q1. There are some practicalities that need to be worked through in terms of how will we record and report some of that, which will be taken through the next People Committee, but we intend to pilot a new approach in Q1, recognising that we need to focus as much on the quality of that appraisal discussion that happens as much as we do for the number of appraisals that have been completed.
The report in the pack is month 11. Clearly we've moved on quite significantly since then, but I am pleased to say that we achieved our forecast outturn. The month 11 report identifies a forecast of 21 million. Since that date we received further 2 million, which reduced our forecast outturn to 19 million. We did achieve the trajectory to the year end that we forecast, and I'd like to document thanks to the organisation for the significant push in the last quarter of the financial year, particularly that made that a possibility. And we also achieved our exit run rate, which actually, when we did some work with PwC, we actually forecast that in 7. So the exit run rate was achieved at 38 million. You'll see in the pack as well, we've got some significant deficits in some of the old care group structures. We've addressed that in the budget setting amount for 25-26 and turned to very much an exit run rate viewpoint for all our services. So we've been discussing with everyone around the 25-26 plan differences and how to think about the expenditure and not just the plan. Our uncoded activity continues to rise as well, and you'll see in the income part of the report we've got an upward trajectory of uncoded activity, which is actually a concern, excuse me, a concern not just for the financial position but also for recording of patient activity data across other portfolios. A report is coming to Finance and Performance Committee on a regular basis that identifies the actions that the I3 team are putting in place to resolve that and improve that position, and they are regularly aware that that is the case. Our agency performance, Ali's alluded to that already, is excellent, 2.41% against a cap of 3.2%. And in the old structure, as this report is, we only have 2 care groups at cap, and predominantly areas of medical expenditure. We continue to look at that going to the new financial year. I would just like to mention as well the enhanced controls that we've put in internally across the organisation that I alluded to are in engagement with Finance 1 LSCA, which is across the whole integrated care system, and has been led by PwC and the I&I team. We've had really good feedback on our group control recommendations, that we have achieved implementation across all elements that were recommended. We do have a subsequent review that will be taken our next improvement and assurance group than violence.
Thank you. And finally, access. So in urgent care, you see a bounce back in the reporting month to 6.8% for 4-hour access. You have to say, even at that time, and certainly in the months since, we still see significant congestion in both of our EDs actually, particularly at RLI as you'd expect. So you could take comfort from the assurance column around benchmarking and top quarter for type 1 and so on. I think it'd be fair to say that something from the exec triumvirate then our kind of ongoing attention to the congestion at our front doors is significant. The 12-hour performance slide speaks to that. On the flip side, our ambulance performance for 30-minute handovers is consistently now in a decent place. That was not the case 18 months ago. So we have seen the population get better access to category 1 and 2 ambulances as a result of some of the UEC work that the team's been doing. NMC2R on not meeting criteria to reside on page 148 of the pack. You see there the I guess variation against the mean. We still see that chronic number of between 20 and 25%. We've discussed that many times. It'd be fair to say there's little movement quantitatively in that space. Equally as consistent on a good on the upside is the cancer performance. So you'll see there again the sustained positive. I'll come on to elective in a second and the iteration in elective performance that was predicted. But that, I guess, the assurance we give at that time is that our resource-based planning moves towards resource-based planning in Q4 and into this financial year. It wouldn't impinge on cancer care, and the data support that and continue to support that with all 3 cancer standards being achieved and sustainably achieved. Diagnostic performance is not linked to resourcing, it's linked to staffing and kit. We're not content with the diagnostic performance. We have the resources for it to be better than that. We had a very good and long and in-depth discussion at the performance reviews this week. And we'll have a enumerated plan back to the next set of performance reviews, which I'll take through the F&P committee. We will get back on track to 5%, and it will be before the kind of month 5, 6 questions when. But we will get that back on track to the national standard. RTT, you could be lost because of the scale of the graph on page 153. But we have, as we predicted, seen our elective performance reduce. We went into that eyes open with the resource decisions that we took in Q4. And so we go from 71% to 68% for our 18-week RTT. We also see our 52-week weights, which were on trajectory to 0, and go up to around 300. By benchmarking, as you'll see in the pack, that still puts us in a very positive place. It means our population still gets a disproportionately good deal in comparison to the national standards, both for 18 weeks and for 52 weeks. And we'll come on later on in the agenda to the activity plan about how we see that back out over the rest of the year. There is a point buried in the text, and I can now find I should have highlighted it, around the disproportionately positive impact on Core 20 Plus. So you'll see this is referenced several times in the text in these slides. And in medicine in particular, we've seen a better improvement in the Core 20 Plus RTT than we have in the general population, but not in women's health. So that, I guess, the reason I raised that is it's showing that our use of Core 20 Plus is targeting our work to the right areas. So we've seen some improvements. We're able to describe those, which is positive, and we can now target our health inequalities work in different parts of the elective pathway and in different specialties. Urgent community response, little to say, and the stroke performance you see there is now grossly out of date, but it is the last reported, so therefore it's in the pack, and we take an update on that through F&P until the new SNAP scores are released later in the year. The only final bit to say, Chair, is in the elective space. many of these achievements are because of the great work done on this site. And we were delighted to receive around 10 days ago notice that this site has been approved by the national team as a surgical hub. Keith will recognise that from his helpful input into that process. That's, as Keith will attest, I'm sure that doesn't happen. You don't just pitch up for that. The evidence bundle, the scrutiny from national experts, and then the crossbar to become a surgical hub is all rightly significant. So the fact that this site's been approved as a surgical hub, but still with some actions to make us even better, is very positive and something that we'll celebrate through communications over the course of this month. And that concludes the IPR section. Thank you.
Thank you, team. Really good, thorough feedback. Thank you, Keith, by the way, for your work on the surgical hub. I've had lots of feedback to say how invaluable your contributions were, so much appreciated. These have been in various guises, elements of this report through various committees, so I'm going to open it up for questions or comments. I've got a couple of questions myself, but I will leave those for the minutes. Sarah.
Thank you. I just wanted, from Quality Assurance Committee perspective, just to come back to the venous thromboembolism update. And thank you for that, Caroline. And we discussed it quite extensively at Quality Assurance Committee. It was on the agenda. I think it's really important that we do note that we're off track on the trajectory that was set. So 6 months ago, we had a 27-month trajectory or something, and now we have an 18-month trajectory, and we're 6 months in, and we were due to be at 70% compliant by now, and we're going to miss that. So that was by the end of March. So I think it is important that we keep that focus on there. And so I think it would be fair to say from a committee perspective, we'd be assured by all of the actions that are in place, and particularly the work with clinical engagement, because clearly this needs to shift with clinical engagement and support. And you know, we'll continue to look for that assurance that it's shifting. So thanks for the update. But I think it's really important to note that as well.
So, Karen.
Oh, thank you. My question is also about venous thromboembolism compliance. It's just this may have been covered in Quality Assurance Committee, but I do recall some time ago there was a report to assure us that there wasn't any harm to patients resulting from that non-compliance with assessment and then any subsequently required prophylaxis. I was just wondering whether we continue to be assured of that, given the time it's taking to improve compliance in this area.
So,
as a starting point, what do you
Sarah, do you want to kick off then?
Yeah, yeah. So I just thought, because you're absolutely right, Karen. So one of the things we were receiving as part of the quarterly report was the assurance around healthcare acquired thrombosis, and because there hasn't been a clinical lead in post, it hasn't been possible to, I think, for that assurance or that correlation to be sort of done, unless Cass can provide an update to the contrary, or Tabitha. But we know that that's a gap, and therefore it is a gap in our assurance at the moment, Karen, and so it's something that we're also looking at from the committee perspective as well.
Okay, so we'll log that as an action pending. Quality Committee will oversee it and provide an update. Chief Executive, just on that point, then in the interim, can we triangulate any incidents, complaints or issues that are raised where PT lack of assessment might have been an underlying cause in the intervening gap? That might be helpful.
Yeah, we'll pick it as an action, and the improvement team can look into that. Yeah.
Brilliant, really helpful. So we'll log that action as well. Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of sort of broader themes. One is around, there was a few points at which we talked about data and data quality. So just a general question, I'm assuming potentially for Ali, is to what strategic objectives and activities are we planning to take to look at where we're still struggling with some of our data quality and access to certain information to make up the intelligence that contribute to these reports, please?
Alison?
So I think the answer to that, Nicola, is more of the kind of system-wide approach that we're wanting to take. So there's a paper that's actually going into the Central Services Executive Subcommittee around data architecture, data quality, data engineering, as we're trying to standardise across all the organisations across the ICS. So I think we'll rather than doing something in isolation, it's important that we join this together and do it as a collective piece of work. But I can pick that up separately with you and share further information.
And do we expect that that will still be able to continue at a reasonable pace to serve our needs?
It's something that's been highlighted as a real priority. So both from a kind of from the digital perspective, a digital and data perspective, but from the broader kind of provider collaborative coordination group as a how do we get to be able to triangulate our data better across all domains.
And just to follow up on that, I noted that we are doing an in-house version of our friends and family survey. Is that going to be a consistent approach across the system, and how will we be able to benchmark if we're doing an in-house version as opposed to a national standard version? Even though I assume it may be a better survey overall.
So I'm going to hand to Tabitha to respond to that.
Firstly, Nicola, it is an in-house for UHMBT, but I'm quite happy to take an action and see what other areas are doing in terms of the effectiveness of it, but it is for us.
Okay.
Thank you. So it'd be useful just to know how that will help us to benchmark and how it will help us to assess our performance better.
Take that offline and that'll be followed.
Thank you.
And that'll be useful to be shared with all events offline in terms of the update on that. Thank you, Tabitha.
Thank you.
Chair. So one reflection for board and then one question. So I think Scott's update on, I guess, the approach we've been taking with Chris Chiswell's input on the core 20+5 interventions, population health interventions, and the impact it's starting to have. When we signed off this year's plan, we did introduce in our clinical strategy, us as an organisation started to get alongside national policy shift and thinking about our role around integrated pathways, neighbourhood development, population health improvement. So just signalling again, Scott and Chris are just doing some thinking with our teams on what that might look like for us from the perspective that we kind of sit within our place. So I'd anticipate bringing something back for a board discussion probably in the autumn, just to work through the summer and see what that might mean for us. So just to flag that, Chair, with the board. The second point around not meeting criteria to reside. There's been a lot of work gone on still in the last 12-18 months that's allowed us in the north of our patch to make some change, but it's still stubbornly at similar levels we've seen for as long as I've been here, actually. But there is one particular area of improvement that Tabitha is leading on at the moment with the division around therapy fit and improving our performance in the areas that we have direct control over. So just wondering, Tabitha, it's worthwhile just for 30 seconds updating the board on progress around that, just for some reassurance.
Very, very quickly, I'll try. I was prepared for that. So currently, as we sit, we're looking at figures of around 137, a week not meeting criteria to reside. RLI under complex care, we've got 22, FGH 11. Not therapy fit, we're seeing a huge improvement because RLI is sitting at 24, FGH at 6. So when you look at 137, the difference is about 74, which is sitting with reablement, intermediate care. This has been escalated to colleagues within the local authority, the Lancaster one, as well as Westmoreland and Fennis, to see if they can help us make a move. Internally, we have a 6-month improvement trajectory to try and reduce those numbers that I've just identified within the complex care and mixed therapy phase. And hopefully by September, we should be able to reach our trajectory. Looking at the trajectory that we've submitted, we should be not therapy fit in September from 38, which is current, now to 10, complex from 35 to about 12 as well. So there is work happening.
Really good to hear the specific trajectories and the numbers. And I know, Tabitha, you're over this with Louisa and the team. I just think then it gives us a stronger platform for the next IAG because of the connections with our waste reduction programme and configuration changes. If we've got that strong internal trajectory of improvement, it allows us then to push using that space with other partners' contribution in a bit more credible way than we might have done before. So we'll pick that up, Chair, in the next time.
Just before I bring Sarah in, that was one of the things I was going to raise. So just for, not for discussion, but can we get a more regular set of updates around this at F&P in terms of that trajectory?
It is already on there.
It's already on there. Okay, apologies for that then, because it's exactly as Aaron was saying. So brilliant. Thank you, Tabitha, for that update. Sarah.
Thank you. First thing I'm going to say is there's been quite a lot of acronyms flying around just in this last discussion, and we just need to remember that not everyone knows what the acronyms mean. So it's just a reminder for us all. Thank you. I just had it was a question about the diagnostics actually, Scott. So thanks for the update on that discussion's been had with divisions. I noticed one of the themes in terms of delays or the reduction in performance was around lack of admin support and different. Is that something that will also be covered and addressed as part of the plans, or is that a separate piece of work?
The short answer is yes. So the CCD division described a specific modality where that may or may not have been an issue, to be honest, but they've mitigated it by moving resources around. So the admin, the booking resource will not be a fundamental barrier to improving the diagnostic performance.
Thank you. And CCD was the
Cancer, community, diagnostics and end-of-life division.
Okay. I've got Carrie, Mike, then myself, and then that's the end of this part of the agenda item. So Carrie first, then Mike.
Thank you. My question is just about the not meeting criteria to reside. Just thinking of a recent workshop that I attended about the risk of harm to especially elderly frail patients when they're admitted to hospital. So in terms of things like pressure ulcers, falls, infections, do we do any particular audits into our not meeting criteria to reside patients, whether they are coming to any harm in our care, or do we do any kind of deeper dives into that?
Thank you, Carrie. Good question, Tabitha.
We have done before, and there's no correlation to not meeting criteria to reside, falls and pressure ulcers. But we can do another deep dive again and submit through QUAC.
Okay, so no correlation, but we'll do another one. Good question, Carrie. Thank you, Mike.
Chair. Tabitha, well, it's not meeting criteria to reside as well. It will be useful to me, and I don't know if it's possible, if we can, when the figures are listed, say there's 100, if they could be listed, say there were 30 that were within our control to get out of the system, and then 30 that are within local authority control, and ones that are shared, and then we could see which ones move as we move through the year, if it's possible.
It is very possible, and we receive those figures on a daily basis, and that's where I've picked the figures that I've just highlighted very quickly. But the report that goes to FNP highlights, because there is 3 buckets we work to. The UHMBT bucket, which focuses on NHS complex discharge, and the other bucket which focuses on the not therapy fit. So each person has got a 50, 50, 50, it's 150 we look at, and the local authority bucket and the primary care bucket. And if you look at the figures I've outlined, not meeting criteria to reside within our bucket is 63. Okay? So the 74 difference to make 137 that we have as I'm speaking belongs to the other 2 buckets. And that's why I'm saying we've escalated to other colleagues to sort of try and work with us to reduce those numbers.
Okay. So we'll just reflect that in the future F&P committee reports. Yeah, that's brilliant, Tabitha, again. It's really helpful. My last question was from me was just about 1LSC, which it's something we've agreed to do as a board. It's a necessity. It's the right thing to do. But obviously it's impacting as we go through this process of implementation. I know there's a regional assurance process, but I'm just potentially this could have an impact around quality, productivity, and if retention issues or recruitment issues are slightly a bit clunky. The question is about assurance. Where are we getting assurance? And I apologise if I don't sound exactly clear. Is it through the people committee or is another process in which we're saying this is where we're up to and this is where it's progressing well? Alison?
Yeah, so the if you recall back when we signed the strategic collaboration agreement, the infrastructure for that in terms of the governance process is through CSEC, so the Central Services Executive Subcommittee.
Yeah.
There has, we've raised this in execs this week as well around
right.
the need for there to be a discussion at CSEC about how the performance of one LSE is being monitored and managed through the CSEC infrastructure, and the principle of an IPR being provided by for one LSE that can be disaggregated for organisations but aggregated as an entirety for one LSE, and for that to be taken through CSEC. So there's going to be a discussion at CSEC on that. It does feel like it's a gap at this point in time.
Brilliant. So can we just, obviously, I think Sarah's our representative on that.
So on the Provider Assurance Committee,
Yeah.
yes, I am the representative there. So
Okay, so can we get an email or a communication back just to update all NEDs to say this is the agreed outcome? Is that okay?
Yeah, so CSEC is next week, so it's probably best prudent to wait until after that meeting and then
Right.
something around.
Thanks, Abby, that's much appreciated. So in conclusion, I think we've had a good dive down into the report. Thank you, team, for an excellent report. And the Board of Directors is asked to note the contents of this report. Are we noting them? Okay, moving on to the 3A reports. Just a gentle reminder that these, if chairs can pull out the salient points from their reports, it'd be much appreciated. So Nicola, Audit Committee, busy time of year. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'll start with the alerts, which is we are anticipating that the internal audit's opinion is going to be positive, but they did award a limited assurance following the review of consultant job planning. Contributing factors were the operational pressures and the implementation of the L2P system, which is the workforce management system. This is the only limited assurance that we'll have received this year, but we do want to closely monitor the follow-on actions from that audit. And we'll do that jointly with the People Committee. The work of the external audit is on track, and the committee approved the audit plan for next year. But we did emphasise the importance of making sure that the audit reviews of both the Kirkuk recommendations and the patient safety incident response framework in the light of recent events is not delayed any further and is a priority on this year's audit plan. And that was agreed with the auditors. The committee approved the anti-fraud plan, and we considered the BAF, and we agreed that we wanted to support progressing an overarching holistic view of the BAF that would be looked at across all assurance committees, with the process being assurance being provided by the audit committee. And then in terms of assurance, the risk relating to the capacity and fragility of the finance team over the last period, we were assured by the mitigations that have been put in place by the outgoing Chief Finance Officer and the interim Chief Finance Officer, this including prioritising team wellbeing and active recruitment efforts. We have been concerned, and it has been impacting audit work as well as other things, the capacity, not the capability, I would stress, but the capacity of that team. The plan for preparing the audit report and accounts is on track and due in June, and we also received and approved the audit annual report and annual effectives review of the committee for the last financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Really good appraisal there of the work. Are there any questions in regards to that, Alison?
So it's just in relation to the consultant job planning limited assurance audit report. So all the infrastructure things, all the enabling things are now in place. The key activities that we need is the completion of the job plans, and we picked that up in every divisional performance review last week to say that by the next meeting we need to see clear, measurable improvement completion trajectories for each of those divisions that we'll monitor through those performance review meetings.
Thank you for that assurance. Thank you very much, Alison. Okay, we'll move on then to the People Committee. Dr. Candini.
Thank you, Chair. Significant alignment here in the 3A's report and what we've already heard today, particularly from Ali. So I'll try not to duplicate. Probably helpful for the board to just be aware that we have recently refreshed the way we manage the agenda through People Committee to make sure that we have significant time to really oversee and discuss and understand the assurance around really key items. And those key items this time were particularly the staff survey that we're going to hear later in the agenda from Ali, but also an item from the divisional directors and their people vision. So they were of significant focus this time. Just by way of alerts, we've already heard about the fragility of the recruitment service team and the impact of that. And although we expect that to start changing from May, it will still take some time to implement. So we'll maintain close oversight of that. With regard to the staff survey results, I know Ali's going to talk to that later, but just to be clear that we had a very extended and full presentation from our head of culture, inclusion and OD, who attended to do that. And also that was paired with a report from Louise, Director of Comms and Engagement, where those two programmes really align. Of particular note on that, as well as the internal work and programmes of work within the organisation to address the really key focuses of the staff survey and concerns, particularly where we see deterioration in some of those metrics. We will also take further reports into the committee about work with our anchor institution partner organisations, particularly around discrimination that staff are experiencing from patients and communities. And we also triangulated an action that the company secretary's taken forwards for us to really triangulate any discriminatory incidents that appear on Lorenzo, triangulate those with data from the Quality Committee. For both of those pieces of work, both the actions in response to the staff survey results and also the communications and stakeholder engagement strategy, we are requesting that future reports focus on both the intended and the actual impacts, so both quantitative and qualitative data, but that really gives us really clear assurance of impact of those actions. We endorse the proposed refreshed approach to appraisals launching in Q1, with a particular focus there on the quality of the appraisals and particularly moving to a very different approach that we recognised is needed, and one that is likely to include much more coaching conversation type approach with the focus on the quality of the impact of that. We welcomed the divisional directors who came to the committee to present to us their people vision, and we will continue to welcome them on a monthly basis with a quarterly report going forwards. Again, focus on evidence of impact of the actions that they're taking within their divisions. And I know that will also correlate with the work that Scott mentioned earlier with regard to the performance accountability framework. We've already heard about the work to improve our oversight and assurance around job-specific essential training, and we will start to take reports on that once that becomes integrated into the IPR. And with regard to the disclosure and barring service summary report, board will be aware that we were anticipating we take a closure report in April. There's a slight delay on that just reflects the operational challenge of closing some historical gaps in employment records. So as a committee, we want to be sure that is thoroughly and completely closed, and we're taking what will be an anticipated closure report in June. And I will stop there.
Thank you, Karen. Are there any points of clarification? You've done a good job there, Karen. We will move on to the next item, which is the Finance Performance Committee. In Amin's absence, I'll deal with that because I've chaired the meeting. So, very briefly, got a triangulation with what Ellen said. So the committee considered financial position at month 12. The good news is it landed where we said it would land, which is 19.1. And Helen's explained the details behind that. I think the second thing to say is that the annual budget was approved by the Board of Directors on the 26th of March 25. So the new divisional arrangements are now in place and we were updated about that. We had a long conversation about the waste reduction initiative programmes. Good news is that there's a significant amount of work being done. At that point, the numbers were still being worked through, but as at the IAG meeting, we're in an excellent place where we anticipate to deliver the expected numbers. However, having said that, there's still a bit of work to be done in terms of ensuring the profiling that over the year, because it won't all happen at the front end of the year. So there's some further work being done, but we're confident that the numbers outlined at circa 30 million up to 37 will be delivered. And then the final, no, that is my final comment on that. So are there any particular points or questions raised from that? Okay, thank you. Sarah, Quality Committee.
Thank you. We've covered most of the Quality Committee items, I think, during the meeting so far, which is everyone will be pleased about. Just a couple of things I think I wanted to flag, one of which isn't on my 3A's report actually, but you'll see on the patient experience report that we're reporting a delay in completing clearance checks for volunteers, some of which are taking over 5 or 6 months. The team is clear it's relating to the recruitment team challenges in terms of ability to process those, but I think we're at risk of actually losing volunteers now because it's taking quite a long time to get them into the system. So I said that we would pick that up and flag that, and I'd just make sure I triangulated it for the People Committee to have on your radar. I just wanted to mention as well the complaints report. So we received the quarterly complaints report at the committee, and we were very assured in terms of what it told us in terms of our excellent process, so the timeliness of dealing with complaints, the quality of them in that we're not seeing revisits and the you know, those sorts of things. But actually, just back to this point about excellent process, but so what? We had some discussion about wanting to see more emphasis on the learning that's coming from the complaints, and then the embeddedness of actions being taken to address that learning. So we've asked for that to be included in future quarterly reports. And I also wanted to flag that actually when you look at the data on the themes emerging from complaints and concerns, after clinical related complaints and concerns, the next biggest group relates to staff interaction. So whether that's customer care or staff attitude. And so the committee was seeking assurance on how we're going to be addressing this. And Chief Nursing Officer did provide an update on the work around professional standards, which again we know would be something that the People Committee would have a oversight of. But I thought it was important to flag that's an important area for focus, I think.
Okay, Sarah. Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions for Sarah? You answered the 3A's report? No. Okay, thank you once again, Sarah. 2 items rest with me. Transformation Improvement Board. In short, we had a recent meeting. The report is attached. The exec sponsor, which is now Scott, worked through a new programme in terms of providing strength and governance, strength and delivery in terms of the programmes and activity. And also we talked about revised membership. On the back of that, we've also identified out of the numbers, as was then, 19 million circa of the transformative programmes and activity related to the 19 million of waste reduction. So about nearly over half of the RIP is located in the transformative work. I'm really pleased with the progression. I feel more assured around the processes outlined by both Scott and the team, and I think we've got a good process going forward, and we will ensure that the board on the big ticket items is properly engaged as necessary for key decisions and implementation. So that's my update in terms of the TIB arrangements. No questions. And then last but not least, the new hospital project committee meetings. The long and short of it, as you see them from the report, because of changing circumstances and the deferral around the suspension of the new hospital programme, we've temporarily suspended that committee. for the moment, because obviously there's no point for that committee to meet. There's a recommendation, so I'm going to read it in full so we're absolutely clear. The committee has recommended suspension of the new hospital programme due to the revised timelines of the National New Hospital Programme following the Secretary of State for Health Social Care statement of January 2025 on the outcome of the government's review into the National New Hospital Programme. The Board of Directors is asked to approve the recommendation of that committee. Do I have your support for that recommendation? Okay, can I just make sure we've got the recommendation? Is that over the line? Yeah. Scott, can I invite you to make a comment?
Yes, and so yes, and I guess just really for a minute rather than anything else, that the reassurance that the work required to put us in the best position for a new hospital whenever that comes continues in a whole number of other areas. So the demand capacity work, the left shift work, multiple other pieces of work, the specific work in Barrow, around Barrow Rising. So all of that stuff will continue and report to various places in the board. Just so we're content that the enabling work doesn't stop. It's purely the governance of the committee itself.
Yeah, thank you, Scott, for that clarification. Okay, so just we have noted the 3H reports, and if I can move us on then to agenda items 10 and 10. Just to say we will overrun by about 5 minutes, so we're going to probably break about at 11:15, but we'll just adjust the programme. So, Deputy Chief, over to you. Annual Plan 25-26 updates.
I can maybe catch us up on sometime with this chair, although it does, of course, need board approval. And the reason I say that is this is probably the 6th time the board's seen this in various guises, through its start at kind of development session, through private board, and then in other fora. Thanks to Louise, Helen, Ali for and Rhiannon for the detail of the paper. So from kind of page 293 onwards then, so I guess the framing first is obvious, isn't it? This is by its definition an annual plan, but it's set in the context of our broader ongoing strategic work. Just a couple of points to pull out from that on 293. So this, of course, we believe takes us even closer to our aspiration to achieving segment 2 of the national oversight framework. Our strategic priorities remain the same, as you'd expect, but we have looked at the national planning guidance there, and it says that we must hold and underline live within our budget, reduce waste and improve productivity, and while doing that, maintain the focus on safety and quality. And that's important because when I come to the detail of the slides, there are the statements that the board has discussed a couple of times around what we may have to accept in terms of our tolerance and appetite. The points also made in that on that slide that this, you may say we say this every year, but we make the statement authentically that this is a really significant kind of once in a long time challenge. Things will need to look different. Not all of those things will be popular or embraced fully, but we've been open and transparent that this plan will necessitate significant change. Some of that public facing, some of it staff facing. The key areas of focus are under outstanding care and experience, working in partnership, culture and conditions for our colleagues, and the best use of our resources all stand. And then you see then from page 295 through page 302, lots of words, but certainly I think does justice to our ambitions, without focusing exclusively on the rightmost column, which is arguably the deficit-based column of things we may have to accept. I think the board's done a good piece of work in getting to the crystallising what we will accept and won't accept as we face into the annual plan in the resource constrained way that we are. So I don't intend picking any specific parts of those slides out, but I'd expect there may be some questions or comments on those. So in the 3 main chunks that are here for sign off, the activity plan and access. So I'll do that one, and then coming to Helen and Ali for the workforce and finance. In terms of activity, we've taken the outturn of the 24-25 year. That's challenging in that the national benchmarking for the planning guidance was in November. And they're two different numbers. So for example, our RTT 18 weeks, referral to treatment time 18 weeks in November was 70.1%. Our outturn position in 31st of March was 68%. So there is a shift between the national planning guidance benchmark and our outturn position, which informs the activity plan, and that's important. And Aaron and I will discuss that specific issue later the national team through the lens of elective care. We again make the point that the activity plan is as crafted on us living within our budget and resources. You see on 305 that balance of the activity expectations and the resource expectations. We will continue to see it. If history predicts the future, we will continue to see, unless mitigated in other ways, that 2.5% to 3% growth in urgent care demand. You know that we sit largely kind of 2 or 3% below the national access standard for 4 hours. And if that growth isn't mitigated in and across our system, then that will be even more challenging for us. Aaron may comment in the discussion, but we are, rather than say that every year, we are going to have to get ahead of some of that growth stuff and try and find different ways to work with colleagues in that space. So we're not kind of simply saying we're a customer of others in this space. There is something we can do as a major provider to seek to do different things for growth. And there's a couple of those bits of work that come through Tim as part of the change and sustainability programme. The detail slide on 306, 307, important point in the purple chunk of that on the left. So our organisation will receive 4.3% less resourcing to deliver elective care this year. And that's different from other trusts, and it therefore informs the top line on the blue box, which says that to comply with national planning guidance, we would go from that baseline November position of 70.1% and be at 75.1%. Given the 4.3% reduction in resourcing, then we will seek to achieve a 5% productivity improvement to stand still at 70% 18-week RTT. That's our current position. That's what we've submitted. There's some discussions later today with Aaron and I and the regional team, potentially national team, on their asks around that. But that is our current position. To go any further than 5% productivity, given our top decile level of performance, will be challenging, but it's a conversation we of course need to have. The rest of the metrics in there give the reassurance against the guidance around 18 weeks to first appointment. We will comply with that. Likewise, 52 weeks and the 2 headline cancer standards at 62 days and 28 days. We also, despite the unfunded growth, undertake to seek to achieve the 78% 4-hour access and 12-hour access improvements. So a challenging space in the resource constraints we've got. The helpful shift in Helen's leadership around that outturn budget will help us with that. It will help us not have an artificial conversation in divisions, and it will move us closer to that resource-based plan for the year in the divisions, which we'll monitor closely through the performance and accountability planning. So that's the activity. Move on, Ali, we made to the workforce plan.
So this triangulates with the WR-FIPs, so the wage reduction and financial improvement plans. So you'll see here that we are planning a reduction in the workforce of 249 over the course of 2025-26. This does include around 27 whole-time equivalents who have transferred from the hospital at home care service into Westmoreland Council, but the remainder is fundamental changes to our establishment and our bank and agency expenditure, in addition to some of the premium rate activities that we have around additional activity what do we call it? Sessions, AIS. I'm trying to not do your acronym. Sorry. So for some of the premium rate activities for initial activity sessions. So that's our overarching workforce number that we're looking for reductions for. It will be enabled through a series of mechanisms, so some through productivity improvements, some through natural wastage. There will be a significant amount of organisational change that's required to deliver against this, some of which may or may not require public consultation, but also obviously will require consultation with colleagues for any of those proposed changes. The submission, I think, is probably just relevant and important to note that this reduction does not include the workforce that is in scope for the services in 1 LSC. This is just for the retained Morecambe Bay services, and obviously this is a significant challenge for us. The MARS scheme is one of the things that has been put into place to hopefully facilitate some of this in a voluntary capacity, and to date we've had 107 applications to that scheme with a close date of the 16th of May, but we do need to be cognizant that some of these changes may require potential for redundancy scenarios to happen, and I think it's important that we're just very open and transparent about that.
Thank you, Alison.
The key point in the financial section is the move from the approved plan that the chair alluded to in the March board, which was 5 million deficit, to a break-even plan. We received an additional 2.5 million, which was just part of the tariff roundup, that obviously then can contribute to our bottom line. And we've made a decision collectively to push our waste reduction programme a further 2.5 million to achieve that break-even position. Clearly, we've got an in-year challenge that we've alluded to during the meeting, and you can see that in slides 314 and 314, where the waste reduction programme is highlighted. Predominantly, that's to do with the profile, the start dates, the things, for example, that Aaron related to around was reducing the bed base in relation to not meeting criteria to reside. That's one example where we will constantly continue to strive to bring those initiatives forward as much as we possibly can. As part of the April submission as well, we've also been asked to align our capital plans. So there are some bids that are going through the process at the moment that have been included in our submission. Obviously, that's caveated around the fact that we may not receive or we may not be successful in those bids. So we just need to be mindful of that, but we've been asked to put those in as part of our submission. Budget setting reviews with all the divisions and corporate directorates internally have taken place. A couple are delayed due to annual leave, and all directors have had a letter then documenting the agreed budget for approval, and that will be shared with the Finance and Performance Committee. We do have a continued push on the waste reduction and financial improvement programme that will not be taken off, I think, for the whole duration of the year. You can see on slide 313, we have an overarching plan of 32 million, which is 42 million in a full year. Risk rating that and profiling it according to expected delivery dates brings it in around 19 million, as you alluded to in your report. So that is our in-year challenge. We still have external support from a transformation director who we are using to actively support that arena and push and support the divisions to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the risks and mitigations are there as read. I won't pick any specific ones out, but they are comprehensive and there as read, and the paper asked for consideration rather than approving. Any questions?
Okay. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I'm going to ask the Chief Executive just to pull a few bits together here.
Yeah, if we can, Chair. So Scott's right, the board has seen elements of the plan and signed off and approved it through its iterations, but it's the first time we'll have seen it in its composite form with all elements of the plan in one story. I think it's important we have that as a reference document. So whilst there is a recommendation for an update, I think it might be helpful for the board to approve the composite plan just for an audit trail. I think it's important to note that whilst we have approved the plan and it's mobilised within our operational executive delivery structures and forms the assurance committee's oversight, we have yet to have it agreed with the regional and national teams. There are 2 points that are not yet agreed. We haven't got a plan for break even yet. We've made a commitment and we've got a gap. The structure that's overseeing that is the IAG, and we're due to go at the end of May to present beginning of June our reassurance that that is the case. Scott and I have articulated a number of times the challenge around the RTT 18-week performance figure. I believe we are going to be pushed pretty hard to improve that to the operational planning guidance target of 75%. That will come with consequences if we are having to do that, both financial, potentially in terms of other areas of priority, and actually in terms of deliverability despite additional investment. I think if we are in that position, Chair, we may have to call something extraordinary. I would want board support and approval for any amendment to the plan. So whilst we might be challenged on it, I think there is a conversation to be had with the board about balance of risk, doability, and how the plan might change as a result before we commit to that.
Thank you, Chief Exec. Just to remind us, we've had private board sessions, we've had private development sessions. I remember at one meeting, one of them said, "This is the best informed I've been since I've been in the trust." And I think this is a piece of iterative work that is going to change and is caveated in the way that Alan's outlined. But I think it's a stellar piece of work, because I think to be in this position in May, this level of clarity, but also challenge still ahead, is credit to the unitary way this board's been working. So I want to say that. Are there any specific questions before we get into? And it's not a problem, Sarah. You've got a specific question, and then Karen.
It was one sort of ask, I guess. I think what we often see with the plan is that overview of the underpinning strategies. I'm not exactly sure where we usually see that, but sort of that sense of where we are with refreshing strategies, which are then part of the assurance. I think you sort of say we're going to do a digital strategy, etc. So it'd be helpful to see that at some point. I think whether it's related to the plan or the BAF.
No, that's getting nods.
Thank you. And then my second question relates to the partnership element of the plan, and where we say we're going to listen to, engage and involve our patients, carers and communities to improve our services. And we say we will not accept patients not having the chance to share opinions, and we won't accept not involving our communities in our decision making and changes. I can't see an action in that we will achieve this by that actually enables us to hear from our patients and carers on the way we want to change things. So I think if we want to say we're not consulting our communities, I think that's appropriate. At the moment, I don't see an action that will involve our communities and patients in that service change. So it's a question really about whether we're changing the language, or actually can we see how we do that as part of it.
Can I just pick that up with initially Tabitha and then Louise?
Okay, so I think we are doing a few things, and I can give you assurance in terms of like how we engage our patients when we are transforming, for example, the meetings we've had with our communities. So I'll liaise with Scott and see how we can probably maybe just change the wording and put the examples of where we're doing that, if that helps.
Yes, definitely, because I wouldn't say I'm receiving a narrative board. I don't know how other colleagues feel about how patients and carers are involved in that process. I can see that we're consulting them, but I'm not seeing how we're involving them. So it's what is our aspiration actually there, is my question in a way.
Louise, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so we've got a programme of engagement, engagement, not involvement at this point, over the next year that we'll be launching the next few weeks that involves public as well. So a bit similar to how we did the bed reconfig stuff with staff. We're going to be doing the same around the next year, but also including sessions for our Foundation Trust members and our stakeholders, etc. And that will start to talk to them about what the next year might look like, how they can get involved. So it will be the start of that process, but it is something we do need to sort of build into the detail a bit more.
Can I bring Aaron in?
I'm just thinking out loud that we have a patient engagement, we have patient experience infrastructure, and we periodically use that infrastructure for helping with complex complaints, service improvement, etc., particularly from access and equality for patient user groups. And whether under the agenda for clinical reconfiguration, clinical strategy change, we put in place some sort of user group, informed expert patient group that will help test, challenge and reflect on those changes. So apologies to the exec team, I'm thinking out loud there, but that feels like something we should explore and put in place.
Okay, so we'll log the action. It's something to come back to at a future point as where we're up to, but we've also got a governance process later on today, which is starting that discussion around the 25-26 plan. I've got Karen, then Nicola, and then we're going to draw a line under it in a minute. So, Karen.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for presenting, Ms. Scott. This feels to me a really clear single story, and feels much easier than anything previously to be able to see that in a very connected way. I'm particularly supportive of the very explicit what we will not accept and what we may have to accept on pages 295 to 302. That feels to me like a really mature way of working organisationally, but also with our colleagues, patients and communities. And has the real, I can see in that the real opportunity for a really clear, consistent strategic narrative that really pulls through some of those statements and really helps us to frame in our assurance committees the lenses through which we view the data, and how we then report that. I'm just wondering if there are plans to take those really explicit statements, particularly page 295 to 302, and use them in that way as a kind of tool to keep framing and reframing this direction of travel. Is that part of the planning?
Louise?
Yes, it is, Karen. In a simple answer, yes, no, it absolutely is. We're going to be launching the communications part of the process next week, hopefully, and that does exactly that. It includes a lot of that information. It keeps referring back to it, and it will do throughout the year.
Thank you. And will the same be the same for our workforce as well? So it's kind of externally and internally that consistency of really clear messaging.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
There is an expectation, just looking at Paul and with the committee chairs, that having agreed the plan and that framework, that it does inform the agendas, the risk appetite and the kinds of reports that I'd expect committee chairs to be asking for. So I don't know whether we need to be that explicit, Karen, but that should feature within the board assurance framework.
Okay, so let's log that. Nicola, last word with you.
Thank you. I won't go into detail, but I would like to echo the comments made both by Sarah and Karen, that it is really helpful to see this as one overarching document, strategic document, and it's really useful to be able to see how all the different elements and tools that we use strategically are linked to one another, and then how that will inform the information and data that we receive at the assurance committees. It does, however, also help me see if I feel there's something maybe not quite there. And the one thing I wanted to pick up was in our BAF, we do have a risk around the successfully implementing digitally enabled transformation and the digital literacy and support our people, including our partners and patients, receive in using technology. And I don't see it in the risks in the strategic document, although you can see the reliance that we're placing, both in terms of workforce planning and in terms of use of our finances and physical resources, the reliance we are paying on technology going forward.
Thank you, Nicola. Really good questions. Alison?
Really valid point, Nicola, and I think obviously when we get to the BAF item, we'll have a discussion. That is generally a first stab, and I think there's a lot of work still to be done on that item for the BAF. But in terms of the risks around the operational plan and how much reliance we are placing on digital advancement, it's a really, really valid point. So I think we should action that and add that in for completeness.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. That was real good insight there. Right, folks, I think in terms of the annual plan, you've heard Aaron talk to that. So what we're saying is, subject to national and regional viewpoints and perspectives, that the board of directors is actually going to approve this version of the annual plan 25-26. Do I have that approval? Thank you. And then secondly, in regards to the waste reduction programme, the board of directors is asked to note the update. Okay. Can I say again, I can't say thank you enough, because I just think this is really cracking work. I know it's hard, but it really is good work. So thank you, everyone. We're going to have a 10-minute break, which means I'm going to be very precise. We'll have 3 more minutes. We'll reconvene at 11:30 on the money. So if you're not in the room, as long as we're quiet, we're going, aren't we, Paul? Exactly. Thank you, folks. Oh.